They themselves get together, those creators, and then they vote to eliminate 2/3 of the list, essentially.
It's totally awesome.
And now two gets the
It's Survivor-esque.
It's Survivor-esque.
I'm Kate Brown, and this is The Art Angle, a podcast from Artnet News. It's been a minute, but we're back with our roundup episode where we parse and discuss some of the biggest stories going on around the art world. And I have to say, it's really good to be back into this format again after a little commercial break. A lot has been happening lately in the so-called art world, good, bad, and there's been plenty of in between that, but it remains as colorful, contradictory, and chaotic as ever. So I'm excited to dig into it today. We'll be diving into crypto collector Justin Sun's escalating legal battle with blue chip titan David Geffen over a long-nosed Giacometti sculpture, a trio of massive Hulk sculptures by Jeff Koons that descended on Frieze New York a couple weeks ago. These big green bellwethers for the state of the market are in play. And finally, we'll look at some of the major developments at Art Basel, including the launch of its very first art award. I'm joined today, as usual, by my co-host, Ben Davis. Hey, Ben, how's it going?
It's great, Kate. You know, it has been a little moment since we did one of these chat casts, and we were off, in case people are wondering, for a good reason. Our producer Sonia is in a band, Heaven, and they were on tour with their album Dream Aloud. People should check it out. But I did miss this format, and, you know, literal people wrote to me to say, you know, what's wrong? Did you guys break up or something? I mean, one of those people was my mom. People are out there. They miss this format, so great to be back.
I certainly missed it. And I missed Sonia as well, so I'm glad to have her back as well. And with us also is Artnet News Pro Editor Andrew Russeth, also from New York. How's it going, Andrew? Nice to have you on.
I'm well. Thanks for having me on. Excited to be here.
So yeah, this past month has been bustling in New York. I'm assuming you guys have been extremely busy. What have you been up to?
It's been whirlwind. We had the big avalanche of art fairs, Frieze, Independent, TAFAF, Nada, on and on and on, and then followed that with a week of auctions.
And Andrew, somehow in the middle of that, you went traveling, right?
Right at the end. That was my treat. I traveled and went to go see the Michael Heiser City after that as a vacation.
Ooh,
Wow, I'm so
amazing.
jealous. This is a famous land artwork that recently opened.
Yeah, opened 2022, I believe. And yeah, he spent 52 years in the desert building it, over, I think, $40 million, all sorts of incredible funders. But he got the thing done, and it totally blew my mind. I had high expectations, and I was prepared to be very disappointed. And yet it was actually sort of nothing like I expected and was a real treat. A nice capstone to the wild 2 weeks in New York.
So what is it like? I mean, just in 2 or 3 sentences, I guess, for 50 years of work.
They always compare it to the National Mall in size. It gives you some sense of it. It is a giant landscape built in the desert. It's 3 hours from Nevada. You drive to a town called Alamo. The team who runs City takes you the rest of the way in the car. The last mile's on a dirt gravel road. You see antelope running by, cows grazing. Heiser raises cows. He has a ranch there. And he's essentially created this just enormous landscape, which is over a mile long, of gravel and stone, and there are a few sculptures that punctuate it, but it's really not like anything I'd ever seen before. I mean, it's sort of like a Zen garden blown up in size, but there are all sorts of strange things that happen with elevation and sight lines. We were there for 3 hours, my wife and I, with the group, and in 3 hours, we sort of didn't even begin to crack it, you feel. It's pretty astonishing.
Do you cross over with other people, or do you really feel like you're alone there?
It's big enough where we got out of the car with 3 other folks, and we basically didn't see them the whole time. They wandered in one direction, we wandered in another. You can sort of wave off into the distance, but you disappear behind hills and valleys and all sorts of strange sloping gravel pits. It's really a bizarre, remarkable thing. It kind of left me speechless.
Hiking inside the art.
Hiking inside the art, exactly.
Outdoor immersion. I love it. And what have you been up to, Ben?
Oh, wow. I saw a fantastic work of art that I thought was so fantastic that I just wrote a little piece just about it. And it's possibly the exact opposite of what Andrew was just talking about. It's by a young artist named Mark Fingerhut, who I'd never heard of before, but apparently has a cult following, and I saw it at this show called Rhizome World, which was a big survey of software-based art to celebrate the anniversary of rhizome.org, which is a very important advocacy organization for net art. And when I was there, I got a chance to see this work that is called Halcyon.exe, The Ride. Packed house. I have a 20-minute slot to get into this work of art, and I just loved it. It was one of the first artworks that I was like, this is a new classic that I've seen recently. It grows out of a kind of artwork that is like malware, not a new, but a novel form of art where it's basically art that takes over a desktop computer to like give you a video experience. And in this case, you walk into a room and you're looking at this big screen that's someone's desktop, and he's taken this artwork that you got it on a USB drive and it took over your computer if you plugged it in and turned it into kind of an immersive experience. Like this desktop comes alive in front of you and starts playing this psychedelic, giddy video that's kind of like a euphoric experience. And then the room around you comes alive, like the seats are vibrating and there are breezes blasting you as things happen on the screen. And this artwork, just really a uniquely joyous work of art that made me laugh. I think it's going to have a really long afterlife. And I hope if it comes to a museum or a computer near you, that you get a chance to experience it. It was really awesome.
Nice. Very cool. I was having some like computer mediated experiences of watching Eurovision and the Conclave, which I feel like we could have a whole other talk about the
third leg of
symbolism.
the aesthetic stool there.
Yeah, exactly. But no, in seriousness, I was actually in Munich not so long ago, and there was an exhibition called Five Friends at the Museum Brandhorst that is the first time that Robert Rauschenberg, Jasper Johns, Merce Cunningham, John Cage, and Cy Twombly's relationships and like creative worlds have been looked at together.
Oh, wow.
I was so floored by this exhibition. I guess the Museum Ludwig in Cologne has like the biggest collection of Cy Twombly's, or one of the biggest. So it had this large focus also on how Cy's interactions with the other four played out over the years. And it was a really moving exhibition. You know, you guys are based in the States, so I know you get a lot of these artists given to you through different contexts all the time, but really seeing the way that they innovated and influenced minimalism and pop art so ahead of their time. And then also like the intimate exchanges that they had.
Yeah.
Merce Cunningham and John Cage were in a relationship, and Cy Twombly and Robert Rauschenberg and Jasper Johns had some relationships over the years. And they set this against, you know, McCarthyist era politics. It was just an incredible show. I hope it travels.
Sounds great.
Yeah. There's a lot of scholarship about, you know, McCarthyism and that kind of neo-Dadaist art, about how, you know, Jasper Johns' flags, these kind of ironic flags, might relate to that kind of moment of feeling that the patriotic mythology around you is coming apart. But I think in some ways, just the idea of that scene, the idea of a scene around them and that kind of intimate relationship has become really important, particularly lately. I find that pretty interesting.
Yeah, it definitely unlocked a lot of their practices for me in a new way. Let's get into the news of the day, though. Ben, do you want to talk about this Justin Sun Giacometti debacle?
Do I want to talk about it? I don't know. It's like teeth-achingly complex, and really all the way over on the opposite end of the emotional spectrum of the art world, from the conviviality and friendships of the of Jasper Johns and Merce Cunningham and John Cage. So this is a story that involves two billionaires, Justin Sun and David Geffen, a cryptocurrency billionaire and a Hollywood billionaire. I guess I should set the stage by saying that Justin Sun's a man in the news. If you're following political news, you'll probably know him as being a top purchaser of Trump coin, who won the right to go to a private reception for the 25 biggest token holders with Donald Trump at his Virginia golf course. This is in the news this last week because it just seems like a very evident sign of political corruption, and Sun himself is a remarkably notorious figure. He runs the Tron blockchain, which is controversial even in cryptocurrency world, since reports have alleged it to be a main artery of illegal dealings in crypto. So a lot to say about Justin Sun. I'm sure we'll get into it, but the reason we are talking about him here is because of this entire other controversy about him that's in the art news. Back in February, Sun sued David Geffen, saying that he wanted the return of a sculpture by Alberto Giacometti, the famous modernist sculptor. The work is called The Nose, which Sun had originally purchased at auction in New York for almost $80 million back in 2021. The sculpture is this profile of a head, a very rough Giacometti-esque form with this long Pinocchio-esque nose trapped inside of a cage, which, given some of the charges of lying and fraud in this story, makes it an apt symbol. Sun is saying that Geffen bought the sculpture from him, but that actually he hadn't wanted to sell it. He says his assistant illegally sold it without his knowledge for $10 million, plus 2 paintings from Geffen's collection that were estimated at $55 million, and that because his assistant had done this without him knowing, now he wanted his Giacometti back. That lawsuit was round 1. In April, David Geffen fired back with a 100-page response saying that the lawsuit on Sun's part was just an example of seller's remorse, and that Sun had concocted this fake story about his assistant to scam the Giacometti back. Geffen's suit also alleged that the real motivation had been that Sun's team had tried to sell the 2 paintings that were part of the original deal. We don't know the names of those paintings, but that they couldn't sell them for a high enough price, and so they had decided they got a bad deal and contrived this lawsuit. There are also some allegations in Geffen's suit that Justin Sun is or has been in some financial difficulties because of various crypto weirdness, hacks, and the volatility of cryptocurrency and so on. And for that reason, he wants this very pricey modernist trophy back. And I can already see your faces glazing over. It's all very complex. By the way, reporter Brian Boucher has stories tracking all of this on the site if listeners want to go into all the nitty-gritty. But there's one more moment to get to. Sun fired back earlier this month. That's why we're talking about it now, saying that he could prove that his story about the assistant was not a lie, was not a fabrication. His lawyer says they can prove that the assistant has confessed to her theft, was arrested in China, and is in detention in China today, and God knows what'll happen next. So much going on here. How have both of you been making sense of this?
I'm really curious what you think, Andrew, because to me, when I pan out a lawsuit between 2 collectors, shady deals, third-party intermediaries, loose documentation, trust broken. I mean, we've heard all of this before in a way, but what strikes me as really new is the crypto collecting world and the sort of traditional blue chip art world, and then the Venn diagram, the overlap being this Giacometti. Like, these 2 worlds haven't bumped up against each other in this way before, to my knowledge.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I love it, Ben. That was such a great rundown. This story has it all. This is just a crypto kingpin accused of quite dramatic wrongdoing by the SEC, all of which, we should be clear, Sun denies. He's been accused of manipulating various cryptocurrencies.
Oh, I didn't even go to that, which Trump dropped those charges.
Yes, exactly.
He
asked the court to pause it. And then also, he kind of shot onto the radar with the purchase of the Catalan banana for about $6 million and change. And so, yeah, you have exactly, Kate, this upstart kind of swashbuckling into the art world. And then Geffen, who of course once was a kind of upstart making his way, now looks like this kind of old guard. I mean, he travels around the world on his yacht from what you can discern on Instagram and deals in these pictures. And yeah, it is this rare glimpse of what sort of goes on. And just the fact that we don't even know if this allegedly rogue assistant is in custody or not, which seems like something we should be able to ascertain.
So just to build out something you just said, Andrew, yeah, that's an entire other part of the Justin Sun story. This character seems to have a real knack for infamy. That late last year, he bought Mauricio Catalan's infamous banana piece, the banana stuck to the wall, and then ate it just to show that he was that kind of guy who could spend $6 million to eat this banana. Whatever. It's a conceptual work of art. It doesn't really matter. I think the banana really obviously plugs into the kind of crypto energy. It's like kind of a joke. It's about the movement of attention and value. And it's really obvious why he would connect to that. I seem to recall that when this Giacometti was purchased back in 2021, just when the NFT moment was happening and digital art, the auction houses were accepting crypto, he was revealed as the purchaser of the Giacometti. I seem to remember there was a moment when people were like, oh, maybe this is like, the crypto folk are going to become the new patrons and they've kind of been onboarded through digital art, but then they're going to become respectable pillars of the collecting community. Kate.
The story bookmarks so many different chapters of what's been happening in the art market recently. Like that sale, which was, I think, one of Sotheby's highest grossing auctions, also had this big Giacometti get sold to an Asian, Hong Kong-based specialist. And everyone was talking about how the Asian collectors are here. And then I also read it's unusual for them to out themselves, but they did. So I feel like there was that moment in the art market. And then it's just interesting seeing how we've ended up at this place now where it's bananas and pure spectacle and goofy jokes and meme coins. And we've gone from a crypto winter back again. It's just all the seasons have come through this story somehow.
Yeah, for sure.
A lot has happened in 5 years, it feels like, as you follow the Justin Sun story. The Washington Post has, I think the headline is, "Who is Justin Sun?" The sort of antics he's gotten up to over the years are incredible. He bid, I think, over $4 million to go to lunch with Warren Buffett and then canceled. He tried to invite Donald Trump to the lunch with Warren Buffett so that he could teach him about cryptocurrency. He also owned the streaming platform that was used by the January 6th rioters, which seems like more a coincidence from what I can tell, but his company BitTorrent. I'm just reciting the Washington Post story. I mean, he also seems to have gotten in trouble with the Chinese authorities at one point. He had some social media banned and he apologized for what he called excessive self-promotion. And then at this dinner with Trump for the meme coin, he claims that Trump gave him a $100,000 Trump watch. I recommend everyone go to the Trump store and check out. You can purchase these. It's a limited edition of 147, I think.
And surprise, it's gold.
And it's gold. It's surrounded by diamonds. He has one now, apparently. To Kate's point, this dream and nightmare of this crypto wealth crashing into the art world. And oh boy, hold on tight.
What I was going to say is that he also paid $28 million to fly on Blue Origin to be Katy Perry before her time, then couldn't go because at that time he thought that he might get arrested if he came to the United States. That was pretty recently. And that's a hole in the background of this story. Like David Geffen's counterclaim, they talk about the ups and downs of the crypto market, basically speculating about why he might want this trophy back because of just the volatility of crypto wealth.
He's just such a bedfellow of Trump, in the sense of just chasing headlines, a sort of financial opportunism and megalomania for just catching a headline. I think the way he's kind of rebranded and branded himself over and over again through these media stunts, even just to buy a $28 million seat on a rocket and not go, it's a brave new world. This is definitely not the last we've heard of Justin Sun, to say the least. On the note of people who can make the headlines, I think Jeff Koons, although a tastemaker, arguably, depending who you talk to, was in the headlines a couple of weeks ago with these Hulk sculptures at Frieze. And I would love to hear what you have to say about those and if you saw them and if they were making sounds while you were there.
I was so excited that we latched onto this topic to talk about. It was really, I think, one of the highlights of Frieze, Gagosian head, these 3 gigantic polychromed bronze sculptures of inflatable Hulks. They're called Hulk Elvis. I have to admit, I had to look up. I didn't understand the Elvis thing. I guess Koons says that the sort of stance that this Hulk is in resembles the Warhol Elvis, the very iconic image of him shooting, this kind of frontal look. They were offered supposedly around $3 million a pop. The one with the tubas sold.
I think you need to build that out. What do you mean you say there's one with the tubas?
Thank you. Yeah, I should flesh this out. So, I mean, these are, I will say, in full disclosure, I love these sculptures. I think they don't necessarily rank for most people as a top flight Koons. I would say, for me, they really are. He did a large series of them. They debuted in Hong Kong with Gagosian, and a number of them have Hulks featuring different items, like one. This was not at Frieze, but one with a giant boulder on his back. There's one, my favorite, where the Hulk is pushing a wheelbarrow filled with real flowers, this kind of rageful figure then bringing joy into the picture. Anyway, the ones at Frieze, there were 2 of them, I should say. 2 of the 3 had instruments integrated into their bodies. So one had these spray of organ pipes shooting out the back, as well as keyboards along the front of the Hulk. And then the other one had an array of tuba horns, as well as a mouthpiece to blow into. So they were fully functional. I had this hope. I mean, I'd been told that they were playable. The vibe of the opening was not like you can go and like ask to toot the horn. That was not. I was hoping there would be a little like more interactive, but it was an intimidating, for me at least, intimidating vibe.
It's an expensive ticket to buy to play a tuba.
Exactly. Yeah, Gagosian did have on Instagram, you can see videos of this. They had experts. They had an organist and an expert tuba player, tubist, I suppose, came in and did this. Amy Armstrong, our wet paint columnist, wrote something really great, because I had this feeling of also just, it felt refreshing in a way to see. I mean, maybe in like a really regressive way, a throwback way. I mean, Koons, as a critical figure, as a market figure, has sort of declined so dramatically from, say, the Whitney show of a number of years ago. But Annie wrote, the series was started over a decade ago. And we should say that, like so many Koons sculptures, he spent like 12, 14 years on some of these. The organ is dated 2004 to 14. The one without the instrument called Dragon and Turtle, which has other inflatables. He spent 17 years making this, 2004 to 2021. Anyway, Annie wrote, the series was started over a decade ago, but they feel right for the moment. Loud, ugly, stupid, and angry. And somehow that felt like a relief. And I sort of felt that too, and it was just this real like wall power, punch in the gut. They just crack me up, these sculptures, for reasons I could babble on about more. But what did you guys think?
Well, can we talk about the sound that they emitted? And also, I do think it's really funny that they were wind instruments. That occurred to me at one point. It's like, it's not percussion, it's wind, like I get it. It's like postmodern, like noise.
I was not impressed by the organ Hulk. The little clip on Instagram sort of sounds like, droning. The tuba, at least, it sounds like, it doesn't sound like it's the best way to play a tuba, but it sounds like a tuba. It's a functional tuba Hulk, is what I'd say about it.
The organ sounded like a deflating balloon.
Right, yes.
Sort of.
Yes.
Agreed.
Yes.
This was not a grand church organ, unfortunately, which when you look at it, you sort of think it will be this.
If you're grading...
And they got a professional organist to come and play it, but then it sort of sounded like, I could have been potentially anybody from my outsider perspective.
I did see it when I was at Frieze. I liked it more than I thought I would. I've sort of come to the idea with Koons that almost everything he says you can ignore. There's this whole line of patter that he has about it, about there's sculptures of inflatable objects and about feeling empty inside or hard on the outside. It's sort of just kind of noise, words as noise. But what I think at his best, and it's because of the tremendous amount of investment that goes into these as material objects, at his best, he really is the rare sculptor in the contemporary context who makes stuff that you look at and you're like, wow, I can't believe that it looks like that. And there's a lot of detail to it. And if you saw it up close, you really see what a difficult challenge it is to make something that looks like an inflatable balloon out of solid matter. You actually do look at it and you're like, wow, that's sort of an enchanting effect. They're a little Baroque for my taste, thematically.
No, they're deranged. My big theory also is, so Sheldall, Peter Sheldall, the late art critic, wrote that the central emotion in Koons's work is rage. He says that the sort of perfectionism that you're describing, Ben, right, that obsession that borders on just like total crazy behavior, it really revolves around rage. For me, the Hulks are these are self-portraits. This is like Koons, the rageful figure, and then embodied in, Phil Tenari has an essay that Gagosian quotes in the press materials about this, that Hulk is, I think, 62 or 63. The Elvis Warhol is there as well. And so it's Koons embodied in this like childhood, Cold War America, absolute thriving baby boom America. It's just pure rage. And to present them as these things that we can touch and put our mouths on, deeply perverse, deeply beautiful, big fan.
I'm curious what you guys think also just having these like flashy trophy objects in this very uncertain market. Like it really felt like a big swing, or was it actually a real safe move? And it's also important to mention that, as I think we sort of touched on, that he's coming back to Gagosian after a little commercial break.
That was the big news. The sculptures themselves, it's an older series, but there's all this drama in the Jeff Koons market story that he's left various blue chip galleries and gone back to them. And this was him returning to Gagosian with, I was going to say a roar, but maybe with a oompa, a tuba sound.
Yeah, I mean, there's an interesting continuation. Again, I don't think Sood and Koons have much in common, but this idea of using the spectacle and the media cycle and sort of pop sensibility in varying but intelligent ways to sort of catch on to the dwindling attention of everybody. It worked. Everyone was paying attention to it.
Yeah, hard to say. I mean, I hadn't thought about it, Kate. I mean, it did feel a little like a different note. Literal different note within the fair. Is that the vibe shift again? Circling back to older kind of turn off your brain culture? I don't know. Or, looking to re-excite collectors with fond memories of Hulk and Elvis and indeed Koons himself in his earlier glory. I don't know. You were covering the market, Andrew. What was the buzz?
Eileen, our reporter, highlighted that was the big sale, right? Everything else was far more affordable as far as art goes. Yeah, I mean, Kate, I think your point's an interesting one. It felt maybe sort of hopeful in a sense, as Ben was saying as well. Maybe we can return to those glory days. I also just loved it too because it's a real show of force by Gagosian. We're back with our old friends, Jeff Koons. We can bring these 3 sculptures. Hopefully we sell one. That'll make a nice headline. And if we don't, at the end of the day, we're the Gagosian Gallery and we have however many branches around the world, 19, and we can take the loss. Whereas a lot of other booths were pretty safe. They were group shows. They were things that you could hopefully sell and cover the cost of the booth, chug along. And so to take some big swings like that, I think was fun to see. And I think that was part of what Annie was getting at as well in her column.
A lot of people, at least in Europe, were saying, everyone was watching Frieze, trying to see what the temperature was ahead of Art Basel, which is coming up in a couple of weeks. And so it'll be interesting to see what kind of trophy works show up there. I'll be excited about that. A lot of news coming out of Art Basel at the moment. The big news last week was that they're actually expanding. They're going to have a fair in Qatar next year, the first one in Doha. That will start with, about 50 booths and then scale up over the years. So that was a big news story. But we're here to talk about the Art Basel Awards, which is something else entirely, but also pretty interesting, I would argue. So they announced this a little bit earlier in the spring that they're going to be launching this new award that is going to happen every year. 36, an interesting choice of words here, medalists will be announced. And then at the Art Basel edition in Miami, the gold medalists will be announced. And they're going to choose from within each other. It's a conclave-esque thing. I was actually doing research when I was distracted by that for an entire week. So yeah, there's different categories. There's the emerging artist category, the established artist category, the icon artist category. And then interestingly, there is a category for media, storytellers, and allies. And I find that this is maybe a really cool strong suit of this new award is that they're bringing in the potential to award an art handler or a curator or a project space. So it really allows for a diversification. I mean, normally these art awards are always just going to artists. Actually, 18 of the awards will go to artists, but the other ones don't necessarily have to. So there's a jury that picks the first 36. And this is, of course, names familiar to all of us. Philip Tenari, as you just mentioned, Andrew, Director and Chief Executive of the UCCA in Beijing. There's Hans-Ulrich Obrist, who likely needs no introduction, but Director of Serpentine Galleries in London. And also Koyu Ko, Executive Director and Chief Curator of the Zeitz MoCA, until recently in Cape Town. She died earlier this month after a recent cancer diagnosis. I wanted to take this opportunity to acknowledge that and just shocked the art world. Such a major loss. They actually just announced that they will be continuing her vision for the Venice Biennial in 2026 because she was set to be curating that. So a group of advisors is going to continue with her vision. It's going to be called The Minor Keys, which is, I think, a beautiful title. Kuo was part of this jury, and they selected some medalists. I'm curious what you guys think about the long list and about this award in general, and then we can kind of get into the intricacies of how they've set this up.
I've been sort of trying to restrain laughter over here, to be honest. I will say, obviously, if you look at the list, everyone on here is remarkable. I mean, I don't know quite every name, but you would say these are, of course, important people who have done incredible things. I just wish they weren't doing it, to be honest. I see it in this context of these brands in the art world, right? They need to become everything now. Hauser and Wirth has the restaurant, the private club, the hotel, whole lifestyle. Art Basel has now 5 fairs with the addition of Doha. They have their report put out by their economist that kind of tracks the market. Now they have their medalists and soon to be gold medalists, kind of like creating this whole infrastructure. It seems unnecessary.
Interesting. I'm kind of into it.
Really? Tell me more.
Why are you into it?
More.
I'm into it sort of in the same way I'm into the Hulk Elvis, slightly ironically. But however, there aren't enough art awards. It's interesting why there aren't enough art awards. I think it's partly because art is such a regional and local thing. It's really hard for people to vote on best art show or something like that because people just don't see what's happening in other places up close. So what institution can sort of cross regions and span different scenes in a way that you could like have some kind of honors that kind of brings international creators together? And I guess this chain of art fairs can kind of do that. Second, it's so weird, this format.
It is admirably weird. I do like that aspect of it.
It is a Hulk with a built-in tuba kind of structure. This thing where you get a bunch of like celebrity curators together. They come up with these lists of creators who are announced at one moment and then honored. And then they themselves get together, those creators, and then they vote to eliminate 2/3 of the list, essentially.
It's totally awesome.
And announce who gets the
It's Survivor-esque.
It's Survivor-esque. And I would love to be the fly on the wall of a conversation between, David Hammonds and Maja Hoffman and, I don't know, the Journal of Curatorial Studies about who gets voted off the island. I just would love to hear that. Yeah, I like the swing, and I don't think there are enough art awards, and I think the more attention there is on specific figures doing good things, the better.
I do understand the intention, though, of like letting people choose from within themselves and having a round table to discuss it as opposed to having these experts come in, although they arguably do that at the onset. I think it's an interesting choice. I think there's something interesting happening where everything is getting very global, but also there's this kind of re-regionalization of fairs and of the art world at the same time. And I think that, as you mentioned, like this is a good reflection of that because it is super international. But then I think all of these figures are really speaking from a different region from the ground. And it does have this very broad and diversified way of feeling very like feet on the ground in these different kinds of art scenes. I really like that about it. And art prizes, I do think there are a lot of them, but maybe not enough of them. You're right, Ben. I think in the sense that there's not enough of them is that there's not enough money given to artists without strings attached. There's so many cutbacks from the public sector at the moment, like all over the West for these kinds of grant systems. And I do think it is time for the private sector to step in meaningfully and like dole out some money that artists can just work with, and also arguably, institutions and other cultural workers. And Art Basel is like an arbiter of cultural legitimacy. They've done a very good job of building that up. So it's not such a leap of the imagination that they would be doing this. They also have an art award in Basel, right? The Baloise Art Prize for statements.
Totally, which it's built up a lot of artists' careers over the years. I agree with everything you said, Kate. My issue is just, if we had been told about this award in advance and said, like, try to come up with names that, a group of prestigious curators might pick, I think we could have come up with about half of them. To me, this list is just, it's already the real global winners, in my opinion. The way even the infrastructure is set up internationally with biennials, especially, there's so much homogeneity already within that I think that, like, yes, I would love to see more money get thrown around. Just this feels very top heavy to me. This feels very like predictable. The final thing I will say is, to Ben's point, there used to be the Rob Pruitt Awards, which I think were kind of New York focused. But I remember the vibe
Well, you have to say what those were.
This was, probably 15 years ago. There was an award ceremony done at the Guggenheim, hosted by Rob Pruitt in this kind of sort of tongue-in-cheek way. I didn't attend, but I remember the vibe being sort of joyous, and it sort of recognized people that weren't necessarily recognized.
That was a series of art awards that almost were like a pop artwork, ironically citing the form of a red carpet art event, Because like, wouldn't
Yes.
it be funny if we had an Oscars for the art world and it was like these extremely local figures or extremely art specific figures who are being nominated? But it was a joke that was like almost serious and kind of delightful. And I actually, now that you're saying it, Andrew, I think that part of my positive reaction to this is that that's when I close my eyes, how I imagine this is like, oh, this is kind of a fake red carpet moment. And also the very weird multi-part judging structure gives me artwork. It's giving artwork to me.
Absolutely.
But I agree with you. I think Art Basel being, the big flagship of market art world, this is very much curator art world, what these awards represent. You and I talk about that, Kate, the biennial art world versus the gallery art world. Almost everybody on this list, I would classify them as biennial figures. Last thing, I got to say, of course, my first thing was like, did they honor any art critics? Who are they honoring? So I thought that was very funny.
And did they?
They have media and storytellers. So they have three figures. Nagar Azimi, who is the head of Bidun, quite good art journal in the Middle East. Barbara Casavecchia, who I believe is the head of Moose magazine now. Not someone I knew very well. And then, as I mentioned before, just the Journal of Curatorial Studies, a publication I've never heard of and is so emblematic of what I just said. Is like, it's, dedicated to curatorial practice with articles including Gaming for Affect, Museum Online Games and the Embrace of Empathy, When Curating Meets Piracy, Rehashing the History of Unauthorized Exhibition Making, and From Obsolete to Contemporary, National Pavilions and the Venice Biennale. So.
Right. Well, at least it's concrete, though, in a way. Like, I think that we'd all grown tired of the Art Review Power 100, where like mitochondria is like up next to win an award. Like they were giving it to like non-persons at this point, which just felt
just
tired.
like yes. Gravity, the most powerful entity in the art world.
Yeah. They're going to be phasing the Art Basel conversations into this, which is interesting. They're the discursive energy of Art Basel conversations, which, arguably brought in a wide breadth of voices to the fair every year. There was usually at least a dozen panels. Will now be sort of a summit of the Art Basel Awards, and they're going to convene the medalists and jurors into the summit that's going to take place at the Messe Basel on June 20th, as well as 4 curated panels. So some changes afoot. I'm looking forward to going down to Basel, and I'll be seeing you there, Andrew, and sadly not you, Ben, but hopefully we'll cross paths
Bring your tux,
soon.
Andrew, in case you get invited to the red carpet.
One can dream. Kate, have you done the rubber ducky thing where you float in the Rhine at Basel, where you put your clothes in the rubber bag?
Didn't know it was called a rubber ducky thing, but I love that. That is how it feels. And I did do it once, actually, and it was wonderful and also quite scary. I would recommend going with someone who knows the currents, because there's like very specific places that you need to get in and get out.
Got it.
But yeah, maybe we can float down the Rhine together. We need a really good waterproof bag.
Very important art fair going tips from the Artnet News editorial team.
All right, well, let's close out. It's been a pleasure. Great to have you on as well, Andrew.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks as always,
Great
Ben.
to be back.
That's it for this week's episode. If you like what you heard, you could subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts. Also, take a moment to rate and review us. It will help other listeners discover what we're doing. The Art Angle is produced by Sonia Manalili with contributions from myself, Ben Davis, Caroline Goldstein, and Naomi Ray. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.